Rogue Radio. Now available on Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/Rogue Country. Keep it rogue.
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Into the Van. I am Mike West and I am so excited to be back for another episode with you kind folks. If you are enjoying this podcast, please go leave it a review wherever you can review your podcast, over to Apple, iTunes, Amazon, wherever. It's greatly appreciated and it'll help us get the word out. Just recommending it to a friend would help infinitely. Word of mouth is always the strongest thing you can do. Today we are of course sponsored by Rogue Radio. I absolutely adore Rogue Radio. It's my favorite radio station, unbiasedly and biasedly, because I am lucky enough to do a little show on there every other week, trying to bring a platform to independent UK, international, European, American, Australian acts that we think don't get enough credit and enough recognition really, and it's just trying to even out the playing field. We are of course brought to you today by my album The Next Life. It's almost been out a year and I can't believe the response for it. Even just the fact one person picked up a copy blew my mind. You can also pick up a copy. I'm going to drop a teaser for you now.
I think we're at a crossroad once again. Wish it was with someone other than my best friends. My head is telling me I have to go. My heart is wishing that it ain't so. So you go left, I'll go right, and I'll catch you in the next life. You go left, I'll go right, and I'll catch you in the next life. We had a good run. You can't say it weren't fun.
And if you dig that, head over to mike333west.com and pick up your copy. We've got vinyl, we've got CD, we've got digital, so we've got all bases covered. Today's episode, I'm so excited to have Brian and Simon from Sodajerker on. They are two local lads who created a podcast about songwriting, and it is such a wealth of information, and their guests are so incredible. Recently, they had Bon Jovi on it. They've had Paul McCartney. They've had Jason Isbell. That's how I first found out about them, because I'm a huge Jason Isbell fan. And their guests and their questions are so great that I've been a fan from the get-go, and to know that they're also local to me was inspiring. And when I started this podcast, Sodajerker, in my mind, was one of those podcasts that was inspiring me. And I'm glad I got to tell them that during this interview as well. This is a really great podcast and songwriting interview, in my opinion. So if you're into those things, this is going to be a wealth of information for you. It's also really entertaining. Brian and Simon are podcast hosts through and through, and it's just a great talk. So without further ado, this is episode 36 of Into the Van with Sodajerker. Welcome to Into the Van with me, Mike West. But yeah, it's weird because it's like, I normally say now we're rolling and it goes into it, but as podcast hosts yourselves, it just must be like a cause of habit now. It's just you slip into it so easily.
It's second nature to us now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how many have we done since we started doing them remotely.
Oh God, I would say about 40.
Wow,
14.
I think it's been that many. I think we were in the 160s. I think when lockdown started. I think, and we're just approaching 200 now. Yeah, so it's closer to 50. I think, because we've still got a bunch in the can as well.
Yeah, oh, that's incredible. I know this is, I think, might be my 35th episode, and it's probably I did like 3 or 4 face to face, and the rest have been digital. But you were talking just before we started rolling, is it like this has been an easier thing for you guys? So it's like obviously cut down the travel, and has it opened up guests that you wouldn't have necessarily got as quick, really?
I'm not sure really. I think in ordinary circumstances, a lot of these people we've spoken to would have been on the kind of promotional trail for albums and stuff, or tours or whatever. So I think they would have been probably visiting the UK if they're not already based in the UK. And we probably would have got quite a few of them. I mean, there's no way we could have done 50 in-person chats. I don't think that would have broken the bank. But yeah. So I guess just the volume. It's helped the kind of volume of episodes we've been able to do. But yeah, I think any other guests really, maybe aside from maybe a Burt Bacharach or someone like that who probably doesn't travel as much these days on account of his rapidly advancing years. And yeah, but generally the younger guests are people who would have been touring and stuff we probably would have got. Yeah.
Oh, cool. With kind of like doing it face to face and doing it digitally, did you notice a change in kind of the guests' comfort really? Because you have, when you're face to face, you get more of a personal connection. But when you're doing it digitally, they might be at home, they might be like slightly more relaxed in their own settings. Did you notice anything from those type of things?
Yeah, we often find that if we get someone remotely and they're in their own space, they're going to be a bit more talkative and more relaxed. And also you tend to get a longer time with them as well. Because they haven't had to go anywhere to do it, so or they're not part of some kind of junket situation where the time is managed by a publicist or something. So you'll tend to get an hour with most people remotely, whereas in other situations we've been forced down to sort of 30 minutes, and it's quite strict. But yeah, there's a lot of complications to it, because in some situations you find that, for example, if we do something in person, it might be easy for us to record it because I'm managing the recording setup, whereas remotely it might be more complicated if we want some audio from them as well. And some people, as you probably know, are super familiar with how to do that, and other people have absolutely no idea, even though they're in the music business and make Grammy-winning albums. They can't record their own voices, so it's sometimes a challenge, and some of that can mean there's 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning where you're fumbling around for stuff, or they go off and say, I need to go and have a look for my headphones, or this sort of stuff.
So I was just going to say, I think conversationally as well, it's a little bit maybe a little bit more challenging than in person, because in person you can there's more of a natural kind of ebb and flow to the conversation. You can sort of politely interrupt, or you can make a motion as if I'm going to say something now, and they will sort of just naturally hold back, and you'll say what that's harder to do on Zoom remotely, so there's a little bit more in the way of interruption and sort of slightly a few faltering moments here and there that you wouldn't necessarily get in the sort of in person, basically.
And obviously you can edit that stuff later to sort of improve the flow of the conversation, but there's no room for quips, is there, on Zoom? Because by the time you've made your snappy comment and they've talked over it and they say, oh sorry, what was that, it's just not funny anymore. So
no, exactly.
Yeah. No, definitely. It is one of those things. And like, I've only done one podcast where it was audio only, and that was just a nightmare for tripping up over each other and things. Like, I always try and at least do a video as well. But before, on a side note, just as from what we were talking about, I can't believe, do you know how like all these talk shows have had like guests remoting in? I can't believe I've got a better setup than like Adele or fucking like Ryan Reynolds or something. How are they still doing it on an iPhone? And like no one's gone to be like, I'm gonna buy like a podcast mic and a HD webcam. Everyone's got like, it's filming through a potato.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And the amount of people who don't wear earphones, so you got all that delay, and again it's the spill and the talking over each other. You get much more of that, obviously, if you're not wearing kind of earphones. Yeah, no, it's crazy. I'm sure, like we do, I'm sure these people are briefed beforehand by the production team to like, listen, if you could wear earphones, if you could be in a quiet room, and some of them take notes, some of them just don't, and that's been our experience.
Mike, do you need audio from us or video?
And it should, if you guys are recording through this, that should be fine.
Just audio though.
Yeah, it's all audio. Okay. It's not a video podcast.
Just checking that you weren't expecting me at the end to give you a nice HD video.
Oh no, it's all just audio. I wouldn't even know how to approach, because not only is it just like, hey, do you want to come and talk to me, a stranger, for an hour, but it's also, do you mind if I stare at you and then put that footage onto the internet as well? I feel it adds like a whole other like performance level to it that I don't want to make people uncomfortable with, and then they have to like watch what they do.
It's true. We experimented with video for one episode, and it was such a hassle, and it was such a sort of impediment in the flow of getting things going, and also post-production as well. We just thought audio is just more fun and less stressful, and it's nicer to not be on camera, and sometimes I think.
Yeah. Although, as you were saying, you prefer to kind of have the guest on camera, and we definitely feel the same. You know what I mean? When you've just got a name on a black background, and we're sitting here kind of large as life, and you just can't see them. It's odd. It's an odd setup. You know, they can see you, you can't see them. And that does make you feel a little bit oddly more self-conscious maybe than if if they're just on the screen with you.
Yeah. And it's a weird one because I enjoy, like, I watch like the Two Bears One Cave podcast and Steve-O's new podcast, and I like to watch them on YouTube, and I smashed a few like the other night when I was just like sitting in bed, but I'd never like do a full video podcast just as its own thing. I always feel like it's just a weird element to it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. Yeah, we've discussed in the past kind of doing some sort of YouTube video series or something like that, but I've always ended up kind of rejecting the idea, because just the idea, just having to talk to camera and it's a whole other skill, I think, that I just don't have. Yeah, audio's just much preferable.
Yeah, definitely. But before the Sodajerker podcast, before all that, you guys met in high school, did you? How long have you guys been friends now?
Since we were about 13 or something.
Yeah, it's getting on for 30 years now. We started secondary school in the same class in like September 1990, that would have been. So we've sort of known of each other for over 30 years now, but I think we probably didn't become friends till maybe year 8, year 9, would you say, Si?
Yeah, although I don't know how that translates, because I still live in the world where you start in Form 1B and then you go into the next one.
Yeah.
Well, it was like second year of high school, was it?
Basically, yeah.
That's so cool. Like, all my like close friends, I've got 6 of us who have, like, we grew up together, we met in high school and things. What do you think it is about that kind of dynamic and those formative years that make a friendship last, like, going into 30 years? Because me and my mates, I'm 30 now, so we're going on like 17 years now, and it's still one of those things where it's like, how have I still managed to like keep these idiots around, and why have they still like let me tag along with them?
It's a pivotal moment in life, isn't it? Just as you're coming into your teens and you're starting to formulate your personality and your tastes. And, well, I guess your personality gets formed earlier than that, but, your sort of adult personality and, what you're going to be about and what you're into and all of that sort of stuff. And, I guess, if you look at people's Facebook pages, oftentimes they're still friends with all the people that they went to school with in that period. Not necessarily friends with people from, primary school, but certainly your senior school is where you can sort of get your gang of mates, isn't it? And usually not many of those go away over time. Although you won't necessarily see them all the time, you do have that thing where if you meet up with them, it feels like no time has passed. You go through a lot together, don't you, in that period of your life?
That's it, yeah. And I think with us as well, a lot of our friendships being based around kind of just a shared taste in music and films and comedy and stuff like that, and we probably bonded. I probably bonded with Si more over that kind of stuff than I did with a lot of other people. People I'm still friends with to this day, but me and Si just seemed to kind of hit it off in that. I think it was films initially, actually, before, because I wasn't really. I liked music, but I wasn't as kind of heavily into it around sort of 13. Probably around 14, 15, I started to get into music more. Whereas Si, I think, was playing guitar when he was like sort of 12, 13 maybe, and getting into stuff. But yeah, I remember sitting together in French in like second year, and somehow I think we were just sat together. We didn't choose this. I think it was just the how the teacher kind of arranged the class, and we happened to end up sat next to each other. And somehow I think we got on to like talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Breakfast Club and John Hughes movies, I remember, and kind of the comedies like National Lampoon's Vacation and things like that. And just it was movies, and then we just sort of quote movie dialogue to each other. And then it's somewhere along the way I sort of started playing music as well. I took up the guitar and then took up the bass, and then we were in a band together, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, I used to tape sketches from Saturday Night Live, the early 90s cast, and give them to Brian on VHS to watch.
And where did you manage to get SNL back in the 90s? Was it on cable or something?
Super Channel, wasn't it? The NBC Super Channel, was it?
I think it was on Sky 1 at like 1 a.m.
Ah. Oh yeah, the Tonight Show was on the NBC Super Channel, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's so cool. And that's kind of like the same thing with me and my friends. It was kind of like we were all the alternative kids in the school, so we got pushed into like just one corner of the school, and it was like, that's where all the moshes are, and you stay there. And then we were like, that's fine, because this is all the people we actually like anyway. So then it was like Sabbath, and then it was me and my friend. It's just like Nick Cage films. And we've always just had like that thread of whenever a new Cage film comes out, we'll go watch it and stuff. But it's amazing how films and like pop culture is like, it really cements into the bedrock of like friendships with your podcast. And obviously you've talked to some absolute legends like Bon Jovi and stuff. Has that been kind of where you have to step back and be like, these are people we've been admiring and talking about since we were kids, and now you get to sit down and have a conversation with them?
Yeah, it's weird. It really is. It's weird, isn't it? You know, a lot of these people we speak to, we've been fans of for decades, and so there is part of you that kind of goes, oh my god, you know, Bon Jovi actually does have that face in real life. And there's another part of you that goes, okay, you've got to ask some questions now, so get on with it. And then you just set all that aside and just try and do your job and get it underway, and usually it comes off pretty well. We've had some lovely experiences with these sorts of people.
Yeah, you've just got to just get on with the task in hand. There's kind of like flippant as that sounds, it's not remotely, you know, you are nervous going into to meet these people or even get on Zoom with them, you know. But yeah, you just in the moment, it's just right, well, you know, let's make the most of this 45 minutes we have with these people and just try and do a good job. So that kind of helps allay the fear and the nerves, because we're keen that at the end of this thing we'll have a good episode, you know what I mean? That's ultimately what it is. It's obviously it's unbelievable to get to meet some of these people, but it's kind of, and that would be nice in and of itself, but you know, we wouldn't want it to just be for its own sake, you know what I mean? We want something good at the end of it that people will enjoy hearing, you know, not just us kind of fawning over famous people.
Yeah. Is it hard to kind of find that balance? Because I've had like people I'm a fan of, and obviously I'm a fan of music. I was nervous about this podcast, if I'm honest, because I've been fans of your show for a while. But is it hard to kind of like separate the adulation and fawning over people to, you know, get down to the questions and actually ask worthwhile questions?
I think we've gotten, immodest as it sounds, pretty good at doing that, really. You know, the first time we ever did it, actually, what I mentioned before, we filmed an interview. That was our first ever in-person interview, with Ben Folds 5, and this was talking about 2012 we did that. And I think we made a rod for our own backs there, because it was our first in-person interview with a band we'd loved since, you know, for like 20 years or something. And maybe not 20 years, but you know, and we're filming it in high def, and it was like, you know, I remember sitting down thinking, why didn't we just do this like over Skype or, but so that was, you know, tremendously nerve-wracking, but we managed to get through it. You know, it might not have been our best interview ever, but it turned out pretty good. And then just over the years through doing it more, you just kind of, I don't know, we're both pretty sensible. We don't get kind of carried away and giddy, you know. We do afterwards. We're excited beforehand, and we're giddy afterwards. But we're both good at kind of right in the moment. We just seem to be able to focus. And personally speaking, I mean, that's just something I discovered I was able to do by doing it. You know, I could never have predicted that. I would never have believed I'd be able to sit face to face with McCartney or Sting and not go to pieces, but that's just how it's turned out, you know. So and you just take kind of courage from that going into future interviews.
Yeah, I think preparation helps as well, because we prepare quite rigorously, and we know what we want to ask about, and we I mean, with a lot of these people we already know the catalogue, but if we don't know the songs as well, then we study up on them, and we pick out things we think are important to ask about, and that can help, you know, when you're in a situation where you're looking into the craggy lines of a famous face. You can kind of rely on what you've prepared to get the question out and get a good answer out of them, you know.
And also typically with the real big guns, you know, you get especially if it's an in-person interview, you get quite a limited time. So it could be 30 minutes, for instance. You know, McCartney or someone like that's like 30 minutes. So that focuses you even more, because it's like, right, there's no time for faffing about here. We've got to just get to the questions, get decent answers, try to steer them away from rambling where possible, which is sometimes easier said than done, but, you know, and yet, so that just focuses the whole thing, you know, and they'll have a new album to promote usually. So it's not like, you know, if they've had like a 50-60 year career, it's not like you can just go over every, you know, album in the back catalogue. You've got to mostly talk about the new thing and maybe draw on some older stuff as well, where, you know, maybe towards the end if there's time. So that helps with the nerves and stuff as well. Because I think if we were given, right, you've got 3 hours with Paul McCartney, then that is hard, and to keep that plate spinning for that length of time would be really difficult. So it's actually, you know, getting 30, maybe 40 minutes is ideal for us, really, and it just makes our job a little bit easier, and just allays the fear.
Yeah, because it is a performance ultimately. You know, you go in there to deliver a kind of performance that when people listen back to it, they're going to be entertained in some way. You know, not that we think of ourselves as entertainers in that fashion, but like, you do have to be asking interesting things and responding in a way that's going to keep things ticking over and keep things fun and engaging, you know. And as Brian said, if you get 30 or 40 minutes with someone and it's a major star with a long history, having the discipline to say, okay, we're not going to cover Penny Lane and, you know, all of that stuff in this chat, but we can do a good job of one album.
Yeah,
that's important, just having that focus and being able to say, because it's very tempting, isn't it, when you get that chance to sit down and ask those questions, but those questions have been answered in great detail elsewhere by people who had more time. You know,
is that something you look for as well, as like, kind of, you know, with Paul McCartney, it's like, you know, the majority of the questions he's been asked. Do you then try and sit there and think of, if that's been the majority of the questions now, what have we not seen before? What are the answers we haven't really got yet?
Yeah, basically. I mean, we're both, you know, big McCartney fans, and we've seen hundreds, probably read hundreds of, or heard hundreds of interviews with him in the past. We know all the tried and trusted anecdotes, you know, the learning B7, the Hey Jude story, you know, movements on your shoulder, all that stuff, you know. So obviously we're trying, like, let's do our damnedest not to go down that kind of avenue. I mean, you know, I've heard people do that too, and they've kind of failed, you know, because sometimes if Paul wants to tell those stories, he'll find a way to tell them, regardless of the question he's been asked. And a lot of people are like that, you know. They're sort of quite, certain stories they're so well told that they've become quite entrenched, and so they're just kind of pulled out at every kind of opportunity. So yeah, you do try your best to kind of steer clear of those kind of well-worn stories. And yeah, I mean, it's fine if he ends up telling something like that, or it's not a problem really. You know, people, I think with McCartney, I think we would have had a free pass for any story he wanted to tell. I think people were kind of so thrilled that we had him on, but obviously we were keen to try and get new stuff, and you know, we had the new album to talk about, so we you know, as I said before, we tried to just focus on that, where possible, maybe draw on some older things and refer to older tracks and things, but mainly we just focused on the new album. And ultimately it's a podcast about songwriting, so it doesn't have to be what I call a kind of jukebox interview, where it's like, now tell me how you wrote this song, tell me how you wrote this song. You know, it doesn't have to be. We want to know ultimately how Paul McCartney, keep using this example, but you know, we want to know how he writes songs. So, you know, whether he's talking about Hey Jude or he's talking about a track off Egypt Station, you're still hearing about how he writes songs. So, you know, we've learned to not be too concerned about, we didn't get to ask about that, we didn't get to ask about this. You know, as long as we get enough insight into the craft of songwriting from that person, it doesn't really matter what songs you ask about.
Yeah. At the same time, I've heard people say try not to be too clever, because people like that have heard it all before in terms of the weird question, how much is a pint of milk, Paul, that sort of stuff. And you try to fox someone like that and they're like, yeah, I've been doing this for 50 years, mate. It's not,
That's right, yeah.
Catch me out. So it's somewhere in between, isn't it? It's as Brian said, it's just focusing on the thing we're really interested in, trying to build up a portrait of that person in that moment on that topic,
Yeah. No, cool. Do you have any influences in terms of interviewers or podcast hosts that you really not necessarily steal from, but you like their delivery? I really like Sean Evans from the Hot Ones YouTube show because of how he kind of presents himself, and the questions he does for the deep dive are really interesting. So taking away the performance of the Hot Wings and stuff, it's a really interesting interview that you don't really get to see from late night and things. Is there anyone that you draw from or are inspired by for your interviewing?
Yeah, different people for different things, I suppose. The way that Mark Maron gets things out of people is always interesting, although there are certain aspects of the way he does that I'm not really a fan of, because it's very much about his own kind of relationship to people or to things from the past, and he sort of works through his problems by talking to people, and some of that isn't really my style at all, but there are just sometimes when he gets a flow on with a conversation, he's kind of unbeatable. So that sort of thing is really good. And then there are other shows which I guess are more specifically about craft, which I find interesting. So Brian Koppelman's podcast, for example, he's the guy who wrote the film Rounders and makes the show Billions. And he talks to people about, he knows a lot about music because he was in the music industries, but he talks about, oftentimes filmmaking and craft of screenwriting and that sort of stuff. And just seeing the parallels between how people approach creativity in other fields is quite, a really interesting thing. And he teases that out of them pretty effectively, I think.
Yeah, I enjoy Adam Buxton's sort of very kind of loose conversational style. I mean, which isn't necessarily what we do, but the sort of the vibe of his conversations is something we sort of try and establish as well. Just a nice conversation between three people. I think there's some of his interviews are. I mean, do you listen to Adam Buxton's podcast at all?
I've only listened to bits.
Yeah,
I've never been a hardcore fan of his. I've only ever listened to, I think, because I'm a fan of the Distraction Pieces podcast, and people always recommended it. So I think I listened to one or two a few years ago, but I didn't stick with it.
Well, I really recommend the Michael Palin one from, might be getting on for sort of 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe. But that I think is one of the best interviews with anyone I've ever heard. There's just something so intimate about it, like The Strangers, where it takes place just in a back room. I think some sort of club Michael Palin is a member of, a Groucho Club type thing or something like that, and it just goes into all these areas of sort of, there's talk about Monty Python and all that sort of stuff. There's fun stuff, but they get into sort of stuff about quite heavy things, like the death of Adam Buxton's father, because he compares his experience to that to Michael Palin's experience of being with Graham Chapman when he died, and Michael Palin, he doesn't shy away from any of it. He's very comfortable talking about it, and it's just, but it's emotional, but it's not heavy. You know what I mean? And or depressing. It's just a very real, warm conversation. There's a really nice rapport there. That's one to start with if you were going to sort of go down that particular rabbit hole. But but that's ideally what we want, is that kind of just a sort of as warm and as kind of intimate a conversation as I guess you can have. Well, it's a different kind of intimacy we're talking about. We're getting into process of songwriting, really. We're not getting into sort of personal stuff, but the vibe of that particular episode I described is kind of, I think, an exemplar, really, of what a good interview-based podcast should be. I mean, and there's a lot of people who do that, but I mean, probably we know there's a lot of people who we try not to be like. I won't name any names, but just in terms of being kind of too present in a conversation, just making it far too much about themselves, not being able to shut up and let the interviewer speak. The interviewees, sorry. Go on.
I think that happens a lot with comedy podcasts, doesn't it? Because it's a comedy podcast, so everyone wants to score all the time, and so the interruptions are designed to kind of say, oh, and yeah, it's just like that time when this happened, and it's frustrating, that I find.
Exactly, that's it. Yeah, it's just we just try and stay out the way as much as possible, and we appreciate that in other interviews as well. We're there to sort of push the conversation along where necessary, but if the person's a good talker and they're just they're giving us good stuff, then we're happy to kind of let them talk. I mean, we will try and jump in if they've been talking for 10 minutes and we're running out of time, we'll try and kind of nip in there and shut them up.
Yeah.
But no, but it's just, and those kind of things, I don't know, each style of guest poses their own. You have the guest who sort of gives you the short, clipped kind of answers. Yeah. And then you have the guest who will happily talk for 10 minutes, and each poses their own separate challenge, which we kind of enjoy. The one we enjoy sort of having to kind of work a bit harder to get more out of the guest. But it's also nice to just kind of sit back and let them do the kind of heavy lifting.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Like, I ended up down a YouTube rabbit hole of podcasting tips and videos and things. I ended up on a video where it was top 10 tips Joe Rogan does for interviews. I was like, oh, that might be interesting. I watched it. I was like, maybe I can get something from that. But I realized it was on a YouTube channel that was just the most toxic masculinity fucking thing in the world. And in the end, I had to reset my entire YouTube channel and clear my search history, clear everything, because I was just getting recommended all these awful videos about show your confidence.
Yeah.
And it just completely derailed that. But then, like you were saying with comedy shows, I'm a huge Bert Kreischer fan, but he cannot let a motherfucker talk for longer than 10 minutes before he jumps in. But with, like you were saying about necessary short clipped answers and guests, how do you kind of get them to elaborate more? Is it more you just have to ask? Because I always worry that when I get short answers, I'm going to burn through the questions I've got kind of prepped, and then I'm kind of just going to be freestyling and free-falling with it. Do you have a plan for this, or is it easier with the two of you there? You can kind of jump in and out.
I think we're lucky that there is two of us, and there have been times where someone's answered a question quite quickly, and luckily Brian's jumped in because I didn't have anything, and thank God he was there. But in general, I'd say what we do is for any particular topic we want to talk about, like a given song, we'll have 2 or 3 follow-ups handy, and if the person covers all of those things when they're asked about the song, then that's fine, we'll probably move on. But if they say, oh yeah, I wrote that in 2016, and that's the answer, then we've got those extra things to say. Oh right, so it was at the piano then, was it? Or and we just want to open it up a little bit more. And when you start pushing like that, people get the sense, oh, they obviously want more on this, so I'll give it to them. Although you do come across people who, for whatever reason, don't have anything else to add about how it happened, and that's not frustrating, but sometimes a bit of a challenge, and you will go through the questions faster than you would have liked, and so that episode might be 25-30 minutes where ordinarily it would have been 45.
And with those questions and with those guests, have you noticed a difference between, say, a newer artist that you're interviewing and like Steve Perry or Bon Jovi, where they've been in the game for so long, they know what's kind of expected of them is to spin a yarn, but the younger artists may be nervous and not as used to talking to themselves in that length of time? Have you noticed a difference between those type of guys?
Don't necessarily, no, actually. Sometimes the younger artists are better in that regard because they may be less grizzled and jaded. They're more, it's this is kind of relatively new to them, and if they're fresh and they're just enthusiastic about music and songwriting, and they're at the start of their journey, So whereas Stephen Perry was a great interviewee and very effusive, but yeah, it's not necessarily any impediment to being kind of smart and insightful about songwriting. just trying to think of a recent young guest we've had on who's a good example. Well, maybe a few years ago we had a guy called Declan McKenna on, who had literally he was about to release his first album. I think, he prior to our interview, I think he'd only put out a couple of EPs and stuff, but he was tremendously articulate and smart beyond his years, and we got lots of great stuff out of him. So and I think that was a lesson to us, actually, because maybe prior to that we maybe were a bit of the opinion that what's a 17-year-old got to tell us, you know what I mean? And then we learned from that, well, quite a lot, actually. So that sort of opened us up to having kind of younger guests. Because I think prior to that, maybe we'd leaned more towards the old guard, or you kind of sort of people who've been around a couple of decades at least. And then after that, we thought, no, we can actually sort of, and I think it's helped the shelf life of the show as well. It's just meant we can go a bit broader and more varied in the styles of people we talk to.
Yeah, I think we realised that some of our future guests are right at this moment doing their GCSEs.
Well, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, and with kind of not necessarily just those younger artists, but as songwriters yourself, and you've been in the, it's 199 episodes so far, 200 will come out soon, will it? So you've been in the game for a while now. Have your songwriting, like your own processes and your own thoughts on songwriting, been challenged and flipped from these conversations?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's hard not to, really, when you've had so much stuff told to you from all these professionals over the years. Anyone, even people who weren't particularly engaged with songwriting, would probably have gleaned quite a lot about creativity in general, or discipline for how you do that kind of work or whatever. But for us, it's like a gold mine, isn't it? We just we think about things in the context of what these people have told us, and it's just a helpful kind of bank of information that we can rely on now to sort of say, well, if this isn't working, then what about we try it that way, because we heard that was a way that someone got around a problem. And that's typically when that stuff becomes useful, because we have our own ideas, obviously, and we've written songs together since we were sort of 13, 14 or whatever, so we don't really need any help in that sense. But when you come across blocks or problems or things that aren't quite what you expected, it is really useful to be able to say, well, what if we just did it the way, Dan Wilson said, do the bass line backwards and, put this on top instead, or try writing a set of lyrics to a song you already know, or just any kind of tip that can help sort of move you on,
Yeah, I think songwriting, it's not easy to do, or it's not easy to do well. Anyone can write a song, and and I would hope we've encouraged a lot of people to try it. Aside from just being listened to by people who were already into songwriting, like some people have just taken up songwriting from listening to the show as well, which is very gratifying. But it's still hard. It's hard to do it well. You know what I mean? I don't think it's made it any easier. But as I says, it just gives you a few more kind of options if you get stuck. Well, let's try this, let's try that, and sometimes things just kind of maybe creep in unconsciously. You don't necessarily sit there and think, well, how would Gilbert O'Sullivan write a song, but then you'll write something and you go, oh, that sounds a little bit like something he would do. You know what I mean? And that comes, just from listening to a lot, because for the interviews, obviously, we have to do a lot of prep, a lot of research, a lot of listening. So we're just constantly absorbing music from all these different people. So aside from like hearing them talk about how they write songs, just listening to so much music has been a real sort of help, I would say.
Yeah, and as Bryce said, it's a real sort of comfort to have that knowledge that everyone who faces this challenge has the same kind of problem. They all come to the blank page, and it doesn't get any easier for any of them, really. No. No matter how many strategies they might have or tools or techniques they might adopt, ultimately everyone's trying to do the same thing, which is to come up with some kind of great idea that's just wed to a great melody, and can carry an idea to a listener, and that's a tough thing to do, no matter what, whether you've been doing it for 50 years or 5 minutes,
I was talking to a guy in Kentucky who's been on this podcast, his episode's coming out soon, called James Reed, and he was talking about when Tyler Childers kind of hit the scene in Kentucky, hundreds of songwriters just gave up and stopped playing. And it was we had this weird conversation about how this many people saw this guy kind of rise up from that scene and, you know, do his songs. That it made a lot of people give up with, obviously, you guys are face to face, not just with, you know, incredible songwriters of, you know, the past, but it's the new songwriters coming up. Do you ever kind of feel daunted when you see those songwriters who are just able to, like, I always listen to like Townes Van Zandt or John Prine, and I hear their turns of phrases and I'm like, fuck. But it's never made me want to stop, but it's made me question myself. Do you guys get that, like, maybe in the middle of a podcast where you're like, I'm completely outgunned here?
Maybe not in the middle of a podcast, but definitely when you're listening, you know, when you're listening to these incredible back catalogues, you know, you do sit back and go, Jesus, you know, it can be overwhelming, and you can then sort of, you know, compare it to what you come up with and think, oh, the fuck, you know, what's even the point? But, you know, and that's a perfectly understandable kind of human reaction, you know, but we're also hugely inspired at the same time.
Yeah.
Depends what mood you're in, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a fairly you know, low mood, maybe you'd be more inclined to say, fuck it, never write another song again. Or you know, maybe, you know, if you're feeling up, you know, that you'll just be inspired by what you hear. It just depends, I guess, on your mood and the time of day. But generally speaking, for us, it's inspiration. We're not deterred in any way, really.
Yeah. Oh, good. Like, that's the main thing. And it's all like, when he said it, it blew my mind. I was like hundreds of people had that same thought, to be like, fuck this. And
Yeah.
it was like, but it was also, and it's not to slag off Tyler Childers because I do love his music, but it was like, it wasn't even like Christopherson or someone like that made you want to quit. It was like this new kid who's come up and is like 3 albums deep and made you want to bail on it.
Yeah, I think if anything's a deterrent, really, or could be a deterrent, it would be just the sheer volume of stuff that there is. You know, there's just so many songs. There's so much music, more music than any of us could possibly hear in a lifetime. And for me personally, like that is a difficult. You know, so if you're sitting down to write something, you know, that the first obstacle for me anyway is try and set aside the fact that there are gazillions of songs, lots of very, very good songs, lots of very talented songwriters. You know, just try and set that aside and just concentrate on what you're doing and try and come up with something that you like first and foremost. Are you getting off on what you're writing? And, you know, that's a hard mindset to get into because, you know, as I say, we're just so bombarded with more than ever, bombarded with content. It's just, you know, it's just being just churned out by the second, and you're sitting down with your guitar trying to come up with something new. And it's easy sometimes to think, oh, maybe there's nothing. Is there anything new, really? But it's those are the things, rather than any one person's song catalogue. It's that general sense of, God, there's so much stuff. I better make this song count.
Yeah.
You know.
And of course, saying that to yourself when you sit down is the thing that would prevent you from making a good contribution.
Yeah. No, it's the whole thing is a process of just, you know, getting out your own head, I guess, getting out the way yourself, however you want to put it, and just trying to get lost in the very act of doing something, and that's, I think that's what a message we want to try and put out there more and more. Really, is just, it's about, you know, ultimately it's about having fun doing it.
Yeah.
And not being too. I mean, I guess it depends on what the context is for you writing. If you have to write, you know, 12 songs for a musical or something, 20 songs for a musical, you know, then there's pressure on, and you can't just go, oh, I'm just going to enjoy it. You know, you've got a job to do, and you've got to propel a story and all that sort of stuff, you know. But just the act of sitting down to write a song it should be an enjoyable thing to do. And you should not put too much pressure on yourself, because, you know, you can put yourself off before you start if you do that. You know, it should just be for the sheer joy of creating.
Yeah. One of the things I always do that's always helped was, because of I write in like the country folk type of genre, if I'm trying to write or I'm suffering from writer's block, I won't listen to anything in that genre. for a good chunk of time, and my go-tos are always either Wu-Tang Clan and Public Enemy, or like Deicide and Suffocation, just for some extreme death or black metal, just to try and like, I always call it a hard reset, just to try and get everything that is like a nice shiny bright chord out of my head.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting. Yeah, no, I haven't thought of that really, but no, it's a good way of kind of clearing the slate, I suppose. And
it started a while back when I was in like a metal band when I was younger, and like the guitarist who was in the band as well, he could basically tell which Metallica album I'd been listening to the day I wrote that riff. So I was like, fuck. So I couldn't listen to Metallica at all when I was writing. So then it's kind of been that same thought process where I can't listen to that genre for too long if I'm trying to do something, because the influences will just kind of overwhelm the like originality and like my own kind of perspective of things.
No, well, to be honest with you, thinking about it, when I've sort of listened to an album I like or I've enjoyed, and then I've got feel kind of inspired, and then picked up and tried to kind of write something right after here, it just has never worked. You know what I mean? Because I'm immediately then I am comparing what I'm doing to this thing I've just heard that I liked. So it can be a sort of dodgy road to go. So you're probably right to kind of you just get completely away from that stuff, listen to something new, or not listen to anything. Yeah. Just kind of try and just go dry for a week or so, and then just see what at the end of that week what kind of stuff you come up with.
Unless you start writing a load of like death speed country or something.
Do you know what? My stuff kind of borders on that anyway, so I do have to kind of draw a line, and then a lot of it is just Wu-Tang and Public Enemy. But what do you think, like, the longest you guys have gone without actually listening to music for the longest period of time, like consciously listening to music for?
Ooh. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, because of the schedule for the podcast, the last 10 years has just been filled with listening. It's 10 years this November since we started, and we're almost always preparing for a guest. So there's, I think, 3 in the calendar now that we're going to be listening for. So, any spare moment I get, I'm putting that playlist on for that artist, So I'm listening to potentially 3 artists at any given time, and they'll all be in different genres and stuff as well. So actively not listening to music at all, I couldn't say that I've done that in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I don't know, maybe a few days at a push. Whereas Sai says, we are sort of constantly prepping for interviews and stuff. So, I mean, it's a funny thing because, we love music, we love listening to music, but prepping for an interview, it's sort of a double-edged sword, because it's great you get access to a new album sometimes by an artist you're a massive fan of, like McCartney. We got Egypt Station when did we get it? About 6 weeks before it was released, something like that. So that's like a tremendous privilege. How often is that going to happen? So that's great, but then there's also the element of homework. You're not just sitting back and immersing yourself in it. You're sort of having to kind of study it a bit and be thinking about, what am I going to ask about this song or that song or this approach or whatever. So, that's as I say, it's I'm kind of ambivalent about the way we have to listen for the podcast. Obviously, it's enjoyable, but it's compromised as well, And usually it's not till maybe after we've interviewed the guest and it's in the can for about a given record or whatever, that then we can go back and hear that thing and go, God, this is really good. I'm enjoying this now. Just the pressure's off. I can just hear it as it was meant to be heard.
Yeah. I do sometimes go back and listen for pleasure after we've interviewed them, which is a slightly different feeling.
Yeah. And you hear the song, it's like, wow, this is, and you realise you weren't really, you were obviously engaging with it, but just in a different way. You were engaging with it as I suppose an interviewer or a music journalist would engage with it. You weren't just like letting yourself just sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was going to be one of the things I asked, because I went to Hope Uni in Liverpool, and I studied music there, and one of the things, like, during my time at university was probably the least creative I ever was. And, I had to write an essay. You had to pick a song, write an essay about it, and the first thing the tutor said was, don't pick a song you like. because you're gonna have to play it to death and you're never gonna want to listen to it again. And I did, like, I kind of like the song, like I love Stevie Wonder, so I did Living for the City because it had like such a wealth of content to like explore and dig. But I've still not really listened to that without thinking of university, and guitar lessons were compulsory, so I just didn't fucking play guitar for a few years after that just because I was sick of the thing. But is it hard when you have like an analytic approach to songwriting and, you know, an academic approach like you do in your backgrounds, to step away and like cut that out to just enjoy the music? Does it take, like you were saying, like a year or two to go back and finally get to appreciate something at the face value of it?
It probably doesn't take that long. I think I'm more likely to go back and listen for pleasure if we have a really great experience with someone. Like I remember when we first interviewed Mike Viola, who's a songwriter who's been on the show twice. I remember after that first interview with him, I was on such a high after hearing him explain his process that I had to drive from Liverpool back to Birmingham right after the interview, and I was playing his playlist at like full volume all the way, even though I'd just prepped for the interview and interviewed him. Because, as I say, it was like a kind of it's almost like a release, you know, and you get to really enjoy it. And I've done that a few times since over the years where I've just, you know, dived in. But I think it's more likely an immediate reaction to really enjoying the person than it is, you know, something that happens like years later or anything like that. I don't think we get scarred by it, you know, and we have to kind of set something aside for a long time. That doesn't happen. Although if you have a slightly negative experience with someone, it does kind of colour the way that I think of that artist forever. And I don't really... I can't say I completely enjoy their music in the way that I once did, just because I kind of know the personality it came from more so than I did before, and that's a little bit of a complication I didn't expect.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Yeah, I mean, although that's been extremely rare, and even the sort of quote unquote negative experiences were not, you know, they weren't nothing terrible really. It was just maybe a person wasn't quite as warm and friendly as you hoped they would be. You didn't get, you know, establish quite the rapport that you thought you would. That's what it is mostly. In terms of sort of, you know, thinking about things analytically and academically, we don't get too sort of deep into that really. We're not, you know, we have some kind of technical knowledge and things like that, but we don't tend to put too much of that into the questions, and we don't listen to, you know, obviously we'll listen out for kind of the structure, so we'll notice things like structure wise or a certain cadence or, you know, a certain melodic kind of flourish or something like that. We'll pick up on those kinds of things, but we don't get too much into the nuts and bolts of sort of music in terms of harmony and you know, and that kind of thing. So we're still able to just listen to things and enjoy them, even as we are kind of studying them, if you like.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of shows out there that get into the scales and modes and, you know, chord sequences and do a musicology of a particular song. That's not really our style. We're much more interested in the creative process in general, I think. And also, you know, I'd find it a little bit of a dead end sitting down with some of these people and trying to say, okay, now when you did that 2-5-1 progression there, and they'd look at you like, I don't even know what those chords are called. I have no idea. And that's generally what you find, is that most of these people are super creative, inspired, talented people, but they couldn't care less about the notes and the chords, you know?
Yeah. No, definitely. And like going back to what you're talking about with, you know, the almost overwhelming amount of music there is now, there is also an overwhelming amount of podcasts now. I read a thing on Twitter where it was like a guy starting a podcast is the male equivalent of a girl getting bangs. And with so many podcasts out, what was the kind of scene like? Obviously you guys started in, was it 2011?
Yeah.
What was the podcast scene like in like a decade ago now?
Obviously less populated.
It was all fields.
Yeah, it was all fields. You could always leave your door open. Yeah, I don't even know if we were like aware of there being any kind of scene. Obviously, we were, you know, we were podcast listeners already by that point, and that was one of the things that kind of inspired us to start it. But yeah, don't know. I guess it felt like a sort of relatively uncharted territory. I think I know that if we were starting now, we'd maybe be slightly put off by just the sheer quantity now.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously the sort of proliferation of celebrity can't even say it, celebrity driven podcasts. You know, it's become more of a kind of business now and a bit of a money game, and you're hearing about all these ridiculous deals people are signing with Spotify, like Joe Rogan and stuff like that, you know, golden handcuffs kind of deals, and yeah, and that's kind of a little bit, I don't know, I mean, we don't want to be too sort of like hippy dippy about it, but it's a little bit off-putting, you know, or it would be off-putting to us if we were starting out now, and I feel like it might be off-putting to other people who were thinking of starting out, or it maybe gives the impression it's this kind of elitist thing that only, you know, celebrities can do in a nice studio in Hollywood somewhere, you know, and it's nonsense. You can do them anywhere with a decent bit of kit, you know what I mean, bit of ingenuity. Like, anyone can do a good podcasts. We've noticed this thing creeping in certain quarters of things being described as amateur, like there's, you know, like amateur podcasts, and, you know, which is sort of a bit, I don't know, insulting maybe, I think, because it's like, because technically, you know, we're not professional in that we don't get paid for doing what we do. We just do it for the love of it, but we put together a good thing, you know, and you wouldn't describe what we do as amateurish, but maybe in the eyes of some of these people, we're an amateur, but you know what I mean? It's just kind of, it's
probably a discourse put together by like more powerful companies, basically, isn't it, to try and stake their claim to that turf as, you know, how can we differentiate ourselves and acquire the most kind of listener share by saying that we're the pros and the rest of them are just kind of amateurs, you know.
Let's make it seem less accessible to the little person, maybe. You know, I don't know, maybe it's not as conscious as that, but did I answer the question? I don't know.
Yeah, no, with Spotify, like, it probably is conscious. You can't really put anything past them, because I saw they brought out like the Barack Obama and Springsteen one, and I got like push notifications on my phone, and I saw one was like, well, there goes my fucking endorsement deal chance with them, if they're spending all the money on those guys. But what I wanted to talk about you guys as well was, you know, you are independent podcasters, you don't even have like ads and things. What was the conscious decision behind that to be, you know, fan supported if people do want to donate and chuck some money to support you guys? What was the conversation behind that and the thought process for it?
I think when we started, I mean, it takes a long time to build up an audience, and I think a lot of podcasts these days, they start up and after the first show they're selling merch and they're, you know, having sponsors and doing all this kind of like mid-roll, end-roll interruptions of the content, you know, and we just sort of thought that was sort of something you would do down the road once you had the larger audience, really.
Putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, I mean, just concentrate on making some good content first. And so that's what we did. And then by the time we built up, you know, 50 episodes or whatever and started getting those offers to sell web hosting for Squarespace, it was like, well, really, they're not offering enough money to make it worth adding that stuff into the content, because it's going to just disrupt the flow of the show. We're going to have to be shilling for all these companies, and really it doesn't cost that much to do in the first place. I mean, we're an independent team, so there's just two of us, which has its limitations in terms of how much stuff we can take on, but at the same time it's not like we need to pay overheads and keep the lights on and pay a staff. So you know, a donation model where people who love the show can give us money if they want to is much more convenient for us, and just helps keep things ticking over. We never planned for it to be a big money spinner, and we certainly didn't want to have you know, be selling mattresses in the middle of an episode, especially if we're getting into a really deep discussion about creativity and that, you know. I don't want to be sort of hearing an emotional story about how someone wrote a song about a loved one that was lost and then turned to selling razors, you know.
Yeah, it's like a really emotional conversation, and then it immediately cuts to how you can keep your balls freshly shaven for the low price of $39.99 or whatever it is. No, that's a really,
it's just not our style, really.
Yeah, I mean, not to say, obviously, if someone came to us and was offering something ridiculous, you know what I mean, we'd be lies if we said,
wouldn't we?
Oh yeah, no, we'd be lies if we said we wouldn't consider it, but it's obviously that hasn't happened, and we're so far down the road now, and as I says, it's generally it's doesn't cost that much. I mean, obviously, in the last few years, it has cost more in terms of just train fares down to London mostly. That's been the main expense, I would say. But this past year we've recorded 50 episodes for in our houses. We're basically, and it just kind of gives the lie to all this nonsense about you need to be in this big Swiss studio, you need a celebrity front your show, you need this, you need that. You don't. You just need to have a good show, and that's it. There are good and bad podcasts, you know what I mean, not sort of professional and amateur,
and the charts tell the truth of that as well, for the most part. Shows like yours and ours are in those charts alongside shows produced by the BBC.
Yeah, that's it. Just having the stamp of an institution like the BBC or doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to be good. Just because it's hosted by a famous actor or a famous TV presenter or whatever doesn't mean it's going to be good. It might be pretty mediocre. It's I guess we found a topic we were enthusiastic about. We just found a concept we thought we might be able to sort of pull off. It wasn't anything sort of earth-shattering in terms of concept. It was just interviews with songwriters, but no one was really kind of doing it. And we just sort of, let's try it. And then here we are, sort of 10 years later, and it worked. It could just as easily not have done, but and yet we're just at pains to kind of, at any opportunity to point out that, it's possible to put together something like, for two people who aren't well known, who don't have some, huge budget to put together a good show that lasts, stands the test of time.
Yeah. Now that's really the amazing thing about your show and podcast is, it still has that punk ethos of it's open to anyone with an internet connection, really. And it's just how much you give a shit and how much work you put into it kind of shows how long you'll be able to stick with it.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, we're as much as we've sort of established ourselves by now, plenty of people sort of know who we are, but we're still ultimately indie. We're as indie as it gets. It's just us. Obviously we sort of liaise with publicists and things to get the guests, but ultimately we're doing all the work. It stands or falls, on how good a job the two of us do, and that's it.
Yeah, it's about persistence, isn't it? If you're willing to stick with a concept and continually try to deliver something of high quality over many years, eventually it just becomes undeniable and people will notice what you're doing, and you can build an audience that way. It's a war of attrition, you might say.
It's mad, and it's just, I don't know, you have to be kind of obsessed as well, maybe slightly demented to stick at it this long for very little, sort of financial reward. You've just got to be really passionate about what you're doing. The amount of people who've said to us over the years, be it friends or relatives or whatever, I can't believe you don't get paid for this. It's well, really, it's kind of, why should we? We certainly didn't start off from the point of let's do something that makes us money. That's not how this began. It started out as sort of a thing we were enthusiastic about.
If that had been our goal, we would have stopped after 10 episodes, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's just not, and people sort of marvel when we say that. Well, we do it for the kind of love of it, because it probably sounds a little bit kind of, I don't know, peace and love, but it's just, it really is true, and it's something just keeps making us do it. It just keeps insisting on itself. We can't seem to stop, even though at times you do think, Jesus Christ, I'm putting all this work in, and you know what I mean, hours of effort and research and listening, and just to create, say, 40 minutes of content that most people won't tell you they liked. You just put it out there, and you assume people have enjoyed it, and it's not like you're getting a round of applause it's just, oh well, I guess, all right, so that's out there. On to the next one now.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, but it's an interesting thing to try and do. But we do it, and we do it for love. But other things come along and encourage you along the way. So like we got to make a documentary for the BBC in like 2016, and we got mentioned in a novel by an American author, featured his main character listening to our show.
I think I saw you share that on like a tweet or something. There was like a little picture of him mentioned. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was Nicholson Baker. His name was Travelling Sprinkler. The book was called.
Yeah, and then you get coverage in New Statesman or The Guardian or whatever it might be, and they write about you in a positive way, and you think, oh well, we must be doing something right, and then you end up getting asked to interview Nile Rodgers at Meltdown on stage in front of 900 people or whatever, and it's like, well, wow, that experience would never have happened if we hadn't have spent all that time doing the podcast for free. So there are kind of auxiliary things that come along and make it worth your while.
Yeah. And those are priceless experiences. You couldn't buy some of the things we've been able to do over the past sort of decade. I guess you could pay for a meet and greet, but to actually get to sit down and spend a meaningful amount of time with these people and ask them about what they do, and you just can't put a price on that, really.
It's reward enough, essentially.
I think when you do it right and when people do it right, it's like, as a fan first always rings true, and that's always like the best way to approach things. But I remember like doing some research for this. I think there's an article from The Echo from when your first 10 episodes hit, and I think it was like you guys hit like 10,000 downloads, and there was a feature for you in The Echo. Was there a specific turning point that you remember being like, not necessarily everyone was leaving reviews or giving you feedback that they would listen to, but was there a turning point where you realized people were tuning in regularly and you were getting like an average number of listeners, and this might be a thing that has legs?
I think it was just always very gradual, wasn't it, Si?
I guess it was from the beginning, but then there was a moment when we had Richard Sherman on, one of the Sherman brothers who wrote all the Disney songs from Mary Poppins and all those musicals, and it was featured on a blog called Boing Boing. It was written about on there, and then like we checked the stats the next day, and there was like an extra 15,000 people had downloaded it, and I was like, oh, it does work. This sort of thing that we'd never really experienced before, of like a sudden change in our popularity does happen, especially if you get coverage in the right place by the right person. And so we sort of noticed that then, and from there were other little sort of tentpole moments, I suppose, where we getting Paul Simon on was a big thing and upped our numbers and gave us one of our most popular episodes ever, and things like that.
Yeah, there's the odd surge like that, I guess, but mostly I guess it's just a very gradual thing. We've just it's just kind of built slowly and surely, just over the years, to the point where we kind of, I don't know, all of a sudden we found that, we do seem to be quite like known and appreciated. Not that we're in any way famous or anything like that, but just in the podcast realm, we seem to, I guess we started to notice that people seem to kind of look up to us in a weird way in terms of like podcasting and what have you. But you get those odd moments. Like with Paul Simon, McCartney, obviously that was a huge moment as well. You can't really wait for those moments to come along, though. You know what I mean? It's just it's just the question. Just keep doing the work. Just keep building it. Enjoy those moments when they come, but they pass very quickly as well. You know what I mean? And you just got to be kind of looking on to the next thing. Obviously, you do take the moment to sort of appreciate these things, but just I guess the demand for content is so great. You know what I mean? That you always got to be sort of thinking about keeping it going. Don't rest on your laurels, kind of thing.
No, it's like it's keeping it in mind, but not like staring at the analytics every day trying to watch like the download counter go, because you'll drive yourself mad.
Exactly. Really, I got a bit obsessed with checking the kind of Apple Podcast charts for a while, and it was just I'd never been so miserable because
one day you were number 2 and the next you were number 82.
Well, sometimes it would be in the space of an hour, like we'd be like number 5, and the next minute we're like dropped out the top 100. I just couldn't get a grip on how does this work? I don't understand. And it was driving me insane. And then at some point I just thought, you know what, I'm just not going to look at these things anymore. I guess I just reached the point where it was like, I'm comfortable that what we're doing is good and listened to by lots of people. And I don't need to know on a daily basis exactly kind of how many people.
If you try to rationalise it according to metrics, you're just going down some kind of unsolvable riddle wrapped in an enigma, aren't you?
Well,
it's like, like Twitter, for example. You can put out an episode and get like 15 likes, and then you can go to your stats and 15,000 people have downloaded it. And you think, oh, so people are there listening, but maybe they're just not engaging with that post,
Yeah. But then I fixate on the 15 likes, it's what, and it's not even important. It's not important. So it's a kind of a myth in a lot of ways that, your Twitter numbers and things like that, because as I says, you could be getting like 10 times that actually engaging with the content, listening, downloading. That's what we do it for. Yet you get preoccupied with, why have only 12 people like our announcements? I don't get it. And again, it's just you drive yourself mad.
And of course you're at the mercy of the algorithms of all these services as well, Facebook and Twitter and whatnot.
Yeah, but that's, I think, what I really appreciate about you guys is how like fan driven and motivated you are to keep going, because it's not a cash in. You aren't selling manscaped.com and things like that. You are doing it for the love of songwriting, and that's because I first found you guys through the Jason Isbell podcast, because I love his music and stuff, and then it was, oh shit, they're from Liverpool as well. I'm from the world only over the water, so I was like, oh, there's 2 guys kind of local to me have made like an amazing podcast. And it was kind of like, it was the same thing as that punk ethos where you find out there's a local band near you that are like doing well, and you're like, oh shit, maybe I could do this too. And that's kind of been, you guys have been one of the inspirations for this podcast. But with your guests and stuff, when you started like booking people, what was kind of your process? Was it a lot of Hail Marys, and then when people replied back you were like, oh my god, I managed to get X or Y? Or were you surprised by people wanting to come on in the like origins of your podcast?
Yeah, it was exactly that. We just sent out some emails to people we thought would be great guests, and we didn't sort of underestimate our ability to get them. We just sort of said, right, well, if we're going to do this, we may as well ask the best people possible. And we sent out a message to Billy Steinberg, and we sent out a message to Todd Rundgren, and then we got 2 messages back saying, sounds great, yes, let's do it. And we sort of, I remember getting that message that Todd Rundgren was going to do the show, the 2nd episode, and sending a message to Bryce saying, Todd Rundgren said yes.
Yeah.
And he was just like, what? And it was completely unbelievable to us at that moment. But then I guess it was just a novel concept at a time at which there wasn't a lot of other stuff around like that, and they just agreed to do it. And because of that, we were able to then say, okay, well, Todd Rundgren's just been on, would you like to do it, Jimmy Webb? And they say yes, and then it's just kind of snowballed from there. So in a way it was kind of easy. We didn't have to, easy by my kind of standards of the amount of work it takes to write all those emails, send all those emails, respond to all the replies, etc.
Yeah. Obviously, there were plenty of emails that weren't answered, or there were plenty of people who said no. But we needed that first 1 or 2 people to say yes, and we got them pretty quickly. And as I says, we were just able to kind of build on that, then kind of get a foothold, and just make it more of an appealing kind of prospect for future guests.
Was there any times where you noticed that, like, because one guest said yes, that like another one did? Because I had like the Gems on VHS YouTube channel, I had Anthony from them on, and then I sent an email to Beans on Toast, and he was a big fan of the Gems on VHS series, so he said yes directly because I'd had that guy on. Has that have happened to you guys where it's been?
I think that did happen. I remember
there was one instance with Mark King. Do you remember that?
Well, Mark King said he'd seen that we'd had Todd Rundgren on, I think, and that was one of the things that sort of made up his mind for him. I think Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil mentioned Jimmy Webb. They were big fans of Jimmy Webb, and I think that might have factored into their kind of saying yes quite early on. I think Johnny Marr maybe might have been a listener to.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the point now where there are quite a few songwriters who listen to the show who haven't been on yet, but they're respected songwriters that we would like to speak to, but they're already listeners. And that's happened in some of the interviews we've walked into. They've said, I listen to your show. And that as an icebreaker, that's great. Because it's like, well, you already know what we do, and here you are prepared to be on it. So it's going to be easy now. It's a real nice, relaxing moment, that is.
Of course, sometimes we get publicists who tell us, our client X is a huge fan of the podcast. We'd love to get him. So we go, oh, yeah, great. And then we'll, start the interview. And we're expecting to start the interview by saying, oh, guys, love the pod. Really glad you had me on. No mention at all. It's just been a total scam by the publicist just to kind of like massage our egos. You know what I mean? They've no idea who we are and probably forget about us immediately as soon as we hang up. But, that's the name of the game. Sometimes, they have to try and sort of flatter.
Yeah.
To,
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And, we're coming up to past an hour. I don't want to take up too much of you guys' time, but what's the future for you guys? Like, how many episodes do you kind of have in the bag at the moment?
There's still, allow me to just simply count them from my desktop. There is, including episode 200, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 episodes in the queue.
Nice.
So we've got content on the way. And that's, 12 is a healthy amount. That's enough to be dealing with because of the amount of effort we put into post-production and editing the shows and putting them together. That's a lot of work. So we don't tend to book too many in advance now these days, because otherwise you can have people in the queue waiting for a really long time. But lately we've managed to kind of speed that up a bit and get a lot of these episodes out. So that's been a bit of a relief. So yeah, the plan is to just get these 12 episodes out and see what's coming around the corner. That's always the brilliant thing about doing this, is the longer you do it, the more these amazing sort of opportunities seem to come along. And every year there's something we simply can't believe has happened. And so we've got our 200th episode out in about a week or so. We've got our 10-year anniversary coming up in November.
Cool.
So
are you doing anything particular for that? You're going to do a live show, or is it going to be an event around that?
Possibly not a live show. We do want to do something, some kind of special bonus episode of some kind, and maybe some other little bits and bobs here and there. We haven't quite settled on exactly what we're going to do, but we are going to mark it somehow, because it's it's too big a milestone not to acknowledge. But yeah, no, as I says, it's just it's just sort of trying to stick around as long as we can, really, and just sort of see what comes along. The moment we stop, that's when those opportunities stop. Yeah. So, and there's still a lot of people we want to speak to, and it's actually got to the point now where, like, we've sort of missed an artist maybe on the last album cycle, sort of 2 or 3 years ago, and then we've got them, 2 or 3. We're still here 2 or 3 years down the line, and we'll get them. And we've sort of got into that mindset now of like, oh, well, maybe if we don't get them this time round, if we're still here and, a year or two, maybe then. And because it's happened on a number of occasions, we've just, it's just a game of patience, really, persistence, and just sort of, we're confident enough now in what we do. We don't necessarily go begging now. It's mostly offers. 99% of the guests that we have on now are offered to us. Awesome. We don't really have to go chasing, which is a real luxury as well.
Cool. And with the kind of like the pandemic and how you've been recording now, having to travel down to London and different things, are you going to try and change to, maybe more remote based stuff so you don't have to travel as much, or would you still prefer them face-to-face interactions?
I'd say we'd probably aim for a mixture, because this has been so successful just doing it this way. Obviously it's born out of terrible circumstances, but it's sort of proven to work really well for us, and we've done some of our best episodes we've ever done in the past 12 months. So we see no reasons to just suddenly, because things open back up again, right, we abandon Zoom. It'd be silly. We'll where possible, or where, if say we're offered some tremendous kind of songwriting superstar, and they're going to be down in London. You know, we'd be fools not to go down and do that in person, really. And we missed, you know, I do miss those in person chats. They are fun to do, and they get, you know, spending the day down in London is always kind of, you know, well, slightly stressful, but generally fun. And that's when we get to see each other normally as well. Like those in person interviews, because we live in different cities. So that was our time for meeting up and hanging out as well, which we haven't been able to do. So that's you know, that's a good excuse for that too. So yeah, I think just, you know, going forward, a mixture of Zoom and in person, hopefully.
No, amazing. Well, you know, thanks so much for your time. I'll let you guys go. And there we have it, folks. That's episode 36 of Into the Van, Into the Bag. I can't thank you enough for listening. Please go listen to Sodajerker's phenomenal podcast. They have so many great guests on that if you love conversations that are open and honest with songwriters and creative folk, you're going to love them. Head over to them. I'm going to be tagging them all in the descriptions of this. Please keep on supporting what you love. Keep doing what you love and keep safe. Peace.